Okay. So we were discussing about class test evaluations, continuous assessment evaluations for this module. So you have like other than the midterm examination and other than the activities given by your lecturer in charge, Dr. Asas, we are having 2 class test activities for this lab sessions, right? So first class test will be there after pipes lab session. So pipes lab is actually the 7th lab, right? We have to discuss 7 lab sessions to do first class test. So this most probably this can be on 9th week or 10th week, because when the midterm comes in the 7th week, we can't do the 7th lab before the midterm. So we have to complete it on 8th week, and then 9th week. During 9th week, we are going to have first class test. If we can finish all lab sessions by 8th week, so then we can do it in somewhere around week 9. And then class test 2, so this will be covering like class test 1 up to lab 7, right? Everything will be there, like the whole knowledge will check up to lab 7, right? And here, this is before final exam. That means usually this will be on week number 14 most of the time. So this is like second class test is this is from the lessons that we are discussing after midterm, but we are going to test your knowledge on P threads. I'll just tell you what are the lessons that I'm going to consider in here. P threads, shared memory, and signal. Okay, so when you do this test, actually you need the knowledge of process management, because in lab 5 and 6 we are going to discuss process management activities and codings related to process management, and you are learning some special functions related to processes. So that knowledge you need, even though you do this class test 2 with the lessons that we are discussing after the midterm, like it's like the base, right? That's why I'm telling you. But basically, I'm checking whether you know about P threads, shared memory, and signals. And remember, class test 1, it's up to lab 7, right? So I'll be testing your knowledge on process management, pipes, and also we are having some share scripting lessons, lab sessions. So that's also going to be evaluated, right? So that's the plan. Tools, actually, like when we have on-campus sessions, I think you can be familiarized with the Ubuntu environment in lab sessions. You can use Ubuntu if you have installed Ubuntu. Like for these lab sessions, I think you need it, Ubuntu, either Fedora, any version, right? It's I'm not forcing you to install Ubuntu into your machines, but you can use any like Fedora, Kali Linux, Ubuntu, any type of Linux distribution, CentOS, right? All of them are supporting for these things, these codings and also shell scripting programs. And you can use any of these tools. I think there are some online tools as well where you can use Linux environment, but it's an online environment. So I think like I haven't checked how much it's going to support for some of these activities, because in like when you're creating processes, you have to observe how it works and how it's going to create inside this system, because there's a file hierarchy. So inside the file hierarchy and inside this process arrangements, how it's going to create these processes. I don't know how much you can observe from online tools, because in IP, I know that you have used online compilers, but this is not only can be done with online compilers, because some of these things you have to observe how it's going to arrange. Right. I think Mac OS is also supporting. I haven't checked it. I think it's supporting for these some of these commands. I haven't worked with Mac OS with Unix commands. So if you need to clarify it, I'll check whether it's supporting. But I'm not sure because I haven't worked with Mac OS with Unix commands and these process management functions, right? Because we are working with some special system calls. Okay, right. Okay, so that's the arrangement. I think we can start the lesson. Okay. For the latecomers, you can copy this information in your books, right? So until that, I'll let you know what is the file structure that we discussed, that we are going to discuss now. So this is the file structure that I have created, right? We have root directory, okay? So you know that forward slash means it's the root directory. So inside the root directory, we know that we have a lot of directories, subdirectories, right? For an example, we have etc directory. Today we are going to look into these directories, right? Dev directory. And also you may have home directory. Most of your accounts maybe are using home directory user accounts. And you have seen that I'm using Kali Linux and I'm going to log as root user. So therefore, root user directory will be in the same level like home directory, right? So in our labs, remember our user accounts like student or ITSD or staff account is within this home directory, right? So just for your information, inside the home directory, we are usually listing down whatever the user accounts like student, ITSD, right? Likewise, we have some user accounts inside home directory. That's the usual way, right? But if you are going to log using root user means it's a very special user in Linux environment because root user can do all the administrative activities, right? So there's no rule that you have to use root user account to do these activities, right? So I'm using that root user account because that's the only account that I have in my Kali Linux, right? But in usual Linux distributions, we can create any number of user accounts because it's supporting for multi-user. And there we can find this student and ITSD accounts, right? Like in your environment, you may have your own user accounts with your names, right? But I'm using this root user. So this is my working place, right? I'm working in here. Okay. So currently in my file hierarchy, I have created some directories within this root user. So inside this root user, last week I created 2 directories, week 1 and week 2, right? So it's better to note it down, right? Because I'm going to erase this, right? Inside week 1, right? Inside week 1 directory, right? These are directories. We have 3 other directories, the ETF, OS. Okay. And I also created 2 files, right? So inside week 1 directory, I created some files. So I'm going to list it down in the same level, but with a different color. One file name is hello.txt. So this is a file. And also I created another file called new hello.txt. Okay, so that's files and 3 directories within week 1. So last week we used this file to show how to work with copy and move commands. I hope you can remember that, right? So to copy, what was the command we used? Can you remember what is the command we used to copy files? CP, very good, right? CP. So I think we copied hello.txt into desktop directory. Okay, so I just go back to my directory. Okay, we were using copy command, right? CP. Yeah. Now, as you can see in my directory hierarchy, here you can see what I have listed. Okay, so what I did was, this is the location, right? Now, when I execute pwd, you know that I can see where I'm working right now. I'm inside root users account. So root directory and root user account can be built. Now, in your cases, you may get answers like / that is the root directory, and then you have home and again / and you can find your own account name, right? Sometimes if you are using root user account, you can see something like this. So within this location, I have these directories right now. So I'm using these, I'm not using these two. I'm using desktop, week 1, week 2 directories, right? Now in my desktop, if I want to see what are the files in my desktop, you can view my desktop right now in here, right? But if you want to make sure what are the files in here, you can just type ls and give a target desktop, right? So target location, this is where I want to see. So desktop is the target location and press enter. There you can see what are the files and directories available in here, right? So I have hello.txt and there's a directory called project. As you can see, there's a directory and also there's a zip file with VMware tools, and also there's a directory with VMware tools, right? So this is computer. Computer is actually it's a shortcut or it's a link to go inside, like it's like my computer. So you can see what is the GUI version of this file hierarchy. So these are the directories and files I have in my desktop. So how did I get this hello.txt to my desktop? Because I copied it from week 1 directory, right? Now this is the week 1 directory, sorry. Week 1 directory content, right? So that's what I have recently drawn to this notepad, right? So we have DAR, ETF, and OS directories, 3 directories within week 1 directory. And hello.txt and new hello.txt are the files that I have created over there. So in last week, I used cp command to copy this hello.txt from week 1 directory and paste it inside the desktop directory, right? And also, if you check ls week 2, you can see that I have copied this new hello.txt file from week 1 and save it inside week 2 directory, right? So that's what I have done in last week. So I want to remind you about CP and move commands with related to uh, relative path method, right? Now, I think in last week, I have told you how to use relative path and absolute path. Some of these commands I have executed and show off how to use with absolute path. But if you want, you can use relative path as well. I think in my slides, I have mentioned how to use both, right? For same activity. Now, if I want to show that move hello.txt file and save it inside week2 directory, how can I do it? Right? Now, right now, this is my location. I'm inside root directory. Let's say if I go inside week1, right? If I move inside week1 directory and I want to copy, move, right? Move means it's similar to cut and paste, right? I want to move hello.txt file from week1 directory and save it inside week2 directory. Yes, move is MV, right? Okay. So let's say now I'm going to show where am I right now. So I'll be inside week1 directory, right? So I need to go inside week1 directory first, right? And using absolute path, I think it's easy to express the idea with absolute path, but I want you to write it in relative path, right? So move or cut and paste hello.txt file from week1 directory to week2 directory using relative path. Remember, we are inside week1 directory. So current I'll include it in here when the current location is week1. Yes, can you tell me? Okay, so some of you have tried it correctly. You can see some of your answers are correct. Remember now, when you're using extension with files like hello.txt, we know that it's a text file, but there's extension, right? So if you are using any extensions, when you're creating the file, you have to use it, right? So if you just type, like if you create the file as hello.txt, but if you're going to use it like hello, it's not going to work, right? So I have to use the command mv. Okay, so this is the file I want to move. Since I'm inside the week1 directory, I can write hello.txt without showing where am I, right? Because if you're currently is within this week1 directory, you're in the same location, right? So either you can write it like ./hello.txt, right? If you have written it like this is also correct. But even if you don't use it, that's correct, right? So you can write relative path just by giving the directory or the file name if you're inside that location, right? But you can't change the location while you're typing this, right? You can't change the location. So where am I right now? I'm inside week1. What is the path actually I have to use? Now this is the file that I want to copy, move. from here to here. Okay. So why should I go to root? Remember, week 1 and week 2, both directories, parent directories, root users directory. So both week 1 and week 2 are residing within root users directory. So week 1 and week 2 are in the same level. So if you want to show the path, either you can go for absolute path, but here, relative path, how do I write it? Current path, current location can be identified with single dot. So if it is week 1, I can write single dot. But as you can see, week 2 is within root directory. So root is the parent directory, right? So then root user, to identify root user, you can provide 2 dots. And inside root user directory, we have week 2 directory. Okay. So these 2 dots mean that's the root directory. Currently, if I'm inside week 1, dots means that's the root directory. And direct your file to week 2 directory. So slash week 2 directory. Okay. So I have cut and paste this. Let's say if you want to change this file name at the end, right? Let's say if you want to do renaming. Now renaming is very easy with the move command because if we want to rename the file, like rename the original file, so we can use move command because it's going to remove the previous name. Yeah, if like there's a question now, one question, if week 2 is within another parent directory, so then you have to show that path again, right? So let's say for an example, if week 2 is within a different directory, now instead of this week 2, like root 1, here if you have a directory like WD, and inside WD if you have week 2, so then you need to show the root directory. If you're inside week 1, show the root directory with 2 dots, and then we are inside WD and then week 2, right? Let's say week 2 is within this type of directory. So then you have to again go back, right? That's root, okay? Now this path is too long, right? Than the path I have explained in here. Now this one is like we are within the same routing, right? Root directory, root user account, like inside the root user, we have another directory like WD. Okay, and inside WD we have week 2 directory. So if I wanted to copy my contents into week 2 directory, first of all, I should go there. I should show that root directory location. So, so then it's just 2 dots, right? And then like this is the path, right? I'll just mark it in this color, right? So week 1 to root, that's 2 dots. And then inside the root directory, we have WD and week 2. Okay. So let's say we have week 2 directory in a different location, like here. So as you can see, now my path is too long, right? I have to go here, root, and from root, home, student, and then week 2. So as you can see, it's a very long path, right? And it's like this, right? From week 1 to root, but root and home directory both are in the same level. So then you have to go to root directory. location, and home, student, and week 2. So then how do I write it? Week 1 to root, that's my parent. Okay, root parent, that is root directory, right? So here, this is my root user. Root user's parent, that is the root directory. So then you have to go back twice, right? So this 2 dots means that is the root directory. Okay, and then inside root directory, we have home, student, week 2. Okay. So this is the root user. First 2 dots are for root user. You're moving backward and come back to root user. Then from root user to root directory. So root user to root directory means this root directory is the parent of root user. And inside the root directory, we have home directory. So home directory and root user is in the same level. So then you can come back to week 2. I think it's clear to you, right? So if the current location is not the week 1, right? So then it's like week, like let's say if you're inside DA or ETF directory and you want to copy these things, so then again it's the same way, right? You may need to write this parent directory for many times if you have this, like if you're inside DA or ETF directories, always directories. So my current location, I'm inside week 1 directory. This is the question that I did, right? So if I'm inside week 1 directory, how do I how do I move or cut and paste hello.txt file from week 1 directory to week 2 directory using relative path? That's what I've discussed. So some questions were asking like, if week 2 directory is within a different directory, how do I write it? So then if you are inside, like if it is like a subdirectory in the same location, so then you can use this method, which is in purple color, right? So if week 2 directory is within WD directory, this is how we can write the destination. But if week 2 is in a different directory, like root user level directory, it's home directory, so then it's actually in a very different, right? Week 2 is in a different directory. So then we have to go back to root, and then root and home is in the same level. Like, so then you have to go back to root directory level, right? Root user level to root directory level, and then come back to the location, like from homes to week 2 like this. So if you are not inside week 1, so then you have to write according to that, right? I'll show this example in my system. So right now, I want to move this hello.txt from week 1 to week 2. So I have to go inside week 1 directory because right now I'm inside roses directory. So when I'm inside week 1 directory, so in week 1 directory, as you can see, I have hello.txt, new hello.txt, and 3 other directories. Okay, so when you check within week 2 directory, you should be able to find hello.txt in there. Now, before all of these actions, I have checked what's inside what's inside week 2 directory. So we had only new hello.txt file. But once you move this hello.txt, it will be like change the location into week 2 directory. Now, if you check week 1 directory, you should be able to find only 3 other directories and hello.txt. Okay. Now, as you can see, we have you can write uh, single dot or 2 dots instead of the parent or current directory names. Right? You don't need to use their names. You can write there. You can denote these directories with a single dot for current directory and 2 dots for parent directory. So if I want to delete these directories, what can I do now? I have to use RM commands, right? So if I want to delete this week 1 directory, as you can see, this week 1 directory is quite complex because it has some subdirectories and some files. So there's some content in within week 1 directory. So if I want to delete it, I can't use rmdir command because it's not empty. So if you want to move multiple number of files, you have to move one by one, or else you have to put them into a directory and copy the directory. Right? So when you're deleting a directory with a content, how do you do that? RM minus RF, right? So let's say if you want to delete week 1 directory, you have to use RM minus RF, right? So I'll show you how to remove a directory. I think you have tested these things. Let's say if I use RMDIR with week 1, you can see there's error message. Okay, so it displays an error message. If I try to delete it like RMDIR command, so then it will show an error message. Right? This is the error message. So if I use RM minus RF, I can delete week 1 without any worries. Right? If you check the directory content, now you can see week 1 is already deleted. So inside week 2, we know that there are 2 other files, right? Let's say if you want to delete these files, you don't need to go there, right? You can do it from the location where you're working right now. So if you want to delete hello.txt, you can type rm week 2 hello.txt and then check the content. See, it's delete, right? So if you want to delete anything, you don't need to go inside that directory. Not always you don't need to go there to see the content even, because you can see I have provided a target and leave the current location. Right? This week 2 is the directory that I wanted to observe. So I just type ls command and week 2. That's the target. So I'm inside the root user, but I can still leave the subdirectory contents using this method. Even if I want to delete anything inside a subdirectory, we can use the same method using rm command. So like if you want to move anything, that's also possible. So let's say if I want to rename a file, right? if I go inside week 2 directory and I want to rename a file, I can use move command, right? New hello.txt. That's the file that I'm going to rename. So renaming is very easy because new hello.txt can be changed as a different file name like file1.txt or anything. Right? So if I leave it now, the name is changed. So when you are making files, especially when you are doing online examinations, I have seen that students are writing file names with different names, right? You are starting the program with different names like hello.txt, something like that. But then you are realizing that file name should be your IT number. So you are trying to change it. So then when you are changing it, sometimes you make mistakes. Like if you try to change it from VI editor, if you do incorrect, like if you are using incorrect commands with VI editor, you can't replace it with the name. Sometimes it can be corrupted. So this method is very easy. If you made a mistake, you can use move command and rename the file, right? So this is the file which I had, new hello.txt. So I have changed it into file1.txt, right? So that's one more option with move command. Even if you want to keep the original copy, let's say you want to keep this hello.txt file as it is and create a new copy with a new name. So then you can use cp command, right? Copy command. Okay. So I think we just things from last week's session. I hope you have done these exercises. I'm not going to discuss it now. I hope you have uploaded the answers to the link. Now, currently the link is disabled. Now you can't submit anything. So we'll start this lab session, today's lab session, because we have so many exercises to try out from today's lab session. So I'm going to erase this file hierarchy. So this is the lab sheet that we are going to discuss today. I hope you have downloaded it. Okay. So this is lab 2, Introduction to Unix Environment, part 2, practical 2, right? Okay. So let me introduce you what are the learning outcomes for today's lesson, second practical. You need to be familiarized with cat command, cat Linux utility, and to familiarize various manuals available in Unix. Familiarize with Unix or Linux directory hierarchy. And also you need to be familiar with the basic use of Linux system and its development tools like C compiler. So I think during the orientation and maybe in the lab sessions, you may have learned C, right? C programming. So today, if you have time, we are going to start C program. So we have very small C program, the starting program with hello world. And we are going to use C programming language to learn process management and all the lab sessions, future lab sessions. But today, first of all, you need to be familiarized with cat command, and then we are going to work with certain commands like head and tail, less and more. And there are many other Unix commands listed in the second page of the practical too. So then you can observe the manual pages of each and every commands and get to know about what are these commands and what kind of information that we can learn. And also, we are going to see what's inside these main directories like etc, dev directory, bin directory, right? So in the top level, you saw that it's not the root user. It's not only the home directory. We have several other directories. So we are going to see what are the directories within the root directory, top level directories. And then we are going to see why do we have these directory hierarchy, because they are going to manage different activities. So we are going to see what are the files within those directories. Okay, we'll start with cat. Now, when you are working with cat command, like if you check the manual page, cat means it's concatenation, right? Concatenation. Now, using cat command, you can easily create files, right? When you learn this cat command, you can see that it's easier than VI editor. You can create files, but you don't have formatting options, right? In VI editor, you can, like if you do mistakes, you can change it and recorrect it. But in cat command, you just enter whatever the contents, like if you press enter and move into the next line, you can't go back and change anything, right? It's not actually an editor, but you can create files using cat command, using the terminal. So when we discuss about this concatenation, actually what we are going to combine in here. We have standard inputs and standard outputs in any computer system, right? Like when you're working with a computer system with a Linux-based operating system or Windows operating system, we have these standard inputs and standard outputs. And also we have something called standard error, right? Actually, so we can divide a system into three categories, like standard input, standard output, and standard error, right? So we have standard input, std in, standard input, and then we have standard output, std out, and standard error. Now, in this example, we are not discussing what are the standard errors, but when you generate any errors, especially like when I try to remove directory with the content using rmdir command, you saw that it was generating an error message. So those are the standard errors, right? std err, right? Standard error. Okay, so when you're working with any computer systems, we can see these three parts. So with cat command, we can work with standard inputs and standard outputs, and we can change the default standard inputs and standard outputs using cat command. Now, what are the default standard inputs? Default standard inputs are like keyboard and mouse. So default means actually how do you get inputs to the system. Basically, like we have different ways of taking inputs, right? Even we can use sensors to read inputs to the system. But basically, you should have at least keyboard and mouse to give inputs to the system. So standard input devices are keyboard and mouse, right? Default devices are keyboard and mouse. Standard output. Where do you output these things? Basically, if you have a monitor, if you have terminal, you can view these things, right? So that's the basic default method, right? But if you want to take printouts, of course, you can take printouts, right? So then the standard output can be different, right? You're using different device. And sometimes you're going to write all of these things into a file, right? And when you're viewing the file, that's again, like you can put all the contents into a file and leave the file. So then when you're viewing the file, it can be like viewing option comes with standard output. That's the terminal. But when you're writing everything into a file, your input part is file, right? So likewise, we can change these things. So basically, we are having keyboard and terminal as the default devices, right? Standard input, default device is keyboard, standard output, default device is terminal. Let's start with that. So when you have keyboard as the standard input, and if you use cat command in the terminal, you can view the content using the same terminal default device, that is terminal, right? You have to press enter. When you type anything using this cat command, then you have to press enter to see whatever the content, right? To execute this cat command, right? Enter key should be used. So I'm going to demonstrate this with the system. So I'm just typing cat, right? Cat is the command, concatenation command, and press enter. Now, I told you that standard input is keyboard, standard output is terminal. I'm going to use cat command. So I just type cat into the shell prompt and press enter. Now what will happen? When you press enter, the cursor is blinking in the next line. So that means it is trying to accept some readings from the keyboard, right? So if you type anything using the keyboard, you can see what you are going to type. And when you press enter, you can echo this back to the terminal, right? So when you type cat command and press enter, cursor is blinking in the next line. So it is waiting to get some contents from the keyboard, right? So I'm just typing hello and press enter. Okay. So when I press enter now, this is what I type, right? Hello is the content that I typed using the keyboard. And when I press enter, you can see it will echo back to the terminal, right? So hello, first line is inserted using the keyboard. Second line comes from the system. So that means actually this is going to be the same line which I have inserted into the system. It will echo back to the terminal. So in the first line, as you can see, that's my standard input because cursor was blinking in the terminal asking for some inputs, right? So using the keyboard, I have just entered hello. So when I press enter key, that's the end of that reading time, right? And it will copy the same content which I have already typed and displayed it to the terminal. So then next line, this line comes from the standard output, right? So standard output is the terminal. So I can see it from the terminal itself, right? So let's say if I type something like, how are you? And press enter, you can see it will echo back, right? So first line of how are you was typed using the keyboard. Second line came from the terminal, right? First line is the input line, standard input. So once you press enter at this point, that's the end of that reading time, right? So when you press enter, just after that, it will display the same content which you have recently typed to the terminal. So this line comes from the standard output. So if you don't type anything and just press enter, you can see enter key will come to the third line, right? Now we have two lines skipped in here because I didn't type anything in this line, right? Just press enter key. So nothing is there in this line, standard input. It's empty. So same thing will be echo back to the terminal in an empty line, right? So if I type new content, so this is what happens, right? It will repeatedly show the same content. Okay. So we can utilize this cat command further, right? So if you want, you can change the standard input. If you want, you can change the standard output. Now, what we did was very easy because we didn't use any other options like reading from files or writing these things into a file. We use the basic option, that is a keyboard and terminal, right? Default option. So default standard input and output devices. So how do I exit it? Now this, you can see this cursor is still in the same next line and it is waiting for new input. So I should exit this prompt, right? Otherwise we can't type anything, right? So in order to exit this prompt, you have to type Control D. Control D, right? Letter D. You can type Control D and exit. So see, you can see the cursor is blinking in the next line, right? Next shell prompt. So you can type anything in here. Control D, right? Right. Let's say my standard input is keyboard and want to write my content into a file, right? In here, keyboard is the standard input. I want to change the standard output into a file, right? So this is the command that I have to use. Cat command, redirection operator, and the file name, right? Cat command, this is the redirection operator and file name. Okay, so you're going to read values from the keyboard. You're reading contents from the keyboard, but writing them into a file, not to the terminal, right? So I'm going to use this command, cat greater than sign and file1.txt. Okay, so this is what I'm going to write. Now you saw that cursor is blinking in the next line, right? So I can type something here and press enter. Hello. I'm typing the same thing, right? Hello. So when I press enter, now you can't see anything, right? In the previous output you saw, when I type hello using the keyboard, I can see the same content on the terminal, right? Because it was echo back to the terminal. Here, default input or standard input was keyboard and default output, standard output was terminal. But in this case, in this example, input comes from keyboard. Standard input is keyboard, but we can't echo back this content to the terminal because we have changed standard output in here, right? So my standard output, new standard output is file1.txt. So this is where we are going to write all of these contents. We can't see them on the terminal because of this, right? So you can type anything like, how are you? You can type anything in here, right? But do you type anything, it's not going to echo back to the terminal because we are writing everything inside a file. So I have changed standard output into a file. So if I type enter, it's just moving to the next line. It's not going to echo back anything, right? So how do I exit? I have given you a hint in the slides. To exit, you have to press Control D. Now this Control D, like when you provide Control D in here, this is going to save this content as well. Now in the previous case, you saw that do you press Control D, it's not going to save it, right? Because we can't keep this like content in the standard output forever. It's just going to echo the content and that's it. That's all, right? But when you provide Control D with files, remember it's going to save it. So if I type Control D, it's going to save it. And if I type something like ls, I can see there's a file called file1.txt. Okay. So let's say I want to leave what's inside file1.txt. I'm opening a new terminal. If I type vi file1.txt and press enter, I can see what's inside file1.txt, right? We have hello, how are you, write into a file, right? The content that you have recently typed using the keyboard can be there in this file. Okay. So one more thing. Yes, there's a question. When using cat command, if you give any name for the file, does it automatically create one? Yes, it will create, but if you don't exit using Control D, it's not going to save it, right? So let's say if you just use cat and greater than sign file .txt, but if you don't exit properly, this file will not be created, right? If you don't use Control D, it's not going to be created. Right? You have to type the content in here. So that's why I told you that you can use this cat command to write something to the file. But remember, you can't go backward, right? Let's say, for an example, if I type something like file1, yeah, we'll create it with uppercase letters. Right? Sorry. There should be greater than sign. Okay. So both file names are same, right? File1.txt and here also it's file1.txt. But remember this one is in uppercase. So Unix systems will consider these things as two different files. So let's say you're typing something in here. But if you want to change it, we can't go back, right? So if I type arrow keys to go up and down, this is what happens. We can't go back. So it's not actually an editor, but basically you can type something in a text file, right? Okay, so I have cleared everything. These are the files now I have. So I'm going to show you one more thing with this. Now I want to change standard input, right? I'm going to change standard input into a file and standard output is default. That's the terminal, right? So that means I'm going to read some contents from a file and display it into the terminal. So it's like you're opening a new file, right? Now in here, then the standard input is keyboard, and when you're writing something into a file, it's like you're opening a new Word file or text file, and you're just typing whatever the contents and save it. In this third scenario, if you want to open it back, if you want to view or read those contents again, then input comes from the file, right? You're not typing anything. You're going to read something existing. So using cat command, less than sign, file1.txt, you can read the content using the terminal, right? So if I use cat less than sign and file1.txt here, I can see the same content which I have recently typed to file1.txt, right? So as you can see from this VI editor, it's the same content which was there in the file1.txt, right? So in this third scenario, remember standard input was changed to a file, but standard output is same as the terminal. So I'm just weaving the content from standard input to the standard output. So there are a few questions, you see. Yeah, when you create file like using cat command. We give any name for the file, does it? Yeah, it will automatically create it, but unless you type anything, it's not going to have some content to weave, right? Using terminal. Can we create a text file in another directory using cat command? Yes, we can. Like when you're creating a file in a different directory, so then with the file name, you have to show the location, right? Now in this examples, I didn't show the path, right? You have to show the path either using absolute path or relative path. You have to show the path correctly. So then you can access a file which is in a different directory, either by using the first scenario, second scenario or third scenario, right? So control D is to save what you have typed. Yes, control D, using control D, you can exit. At the same time, you can save the content. But when you type control D in this first scenario, it's not going to save this content because in a terminal, we can't save anything permanently unless it's a file, right? If you use control D with when the standard output is file, you can save that content. Should we be inside that directory to use cat command? No, you can provide a location, right? Last command again, right? Now in here, the file is the reading standard input, right? I'm going to read some content from a file. Now, I'm not going to type anything. I just want to read inputs from a file and show it using terminal, right? Now in the first one, first option, we were waiting until we input something, right? The cursor was waiting until we input something from the keyboard, right? And when we type anything in the first scenario, it was displayed into the same terminal. It's like echoing back to the terminal, right? Because my standard input, I was reading from keyboard and writing them into the terminal. In the second option, cat command with greater than sign and file1.txt. Here I'm reading contents from the keyboard. So when I type this command, you saw that cursor was blinking. In the next line, it was accepting some readings. But once you type everything, it's not going to echo back to the terminal because this time the standard output is file, right? In the second time, it was file. And when you provide control D, you can save that content which you have recently typed and exit from the cat command. In the third option, when you want to weave a content which is already there in a file, you can use cat command less than sign and file1.txt, right? So this third option is like you're opening a file which has some content. It's like you're opening the lab sheet, right? Lab sheet, in the lab sheet already there's a content, right? In your lab sheet. So when you open the lab sheet, you can see. So are you going to insert anything? No, we are not going to insert anything. We are going to read from the file, right? So we can display it into the terminal. That's the third option. Now, when you want to write as well as save it inside a file, that means when the standard input is file and also standard output is file, how do I do it? You have to find answers for this, right? Okay. So when you upload your work uh, at the end of this lab session, I'm giving you a submission link to upload your work. You have to write answers for this question. When the standard input is file and standard output is also file. So that means we are not going to type anything, right? There should be a file already which is created using the second step, right? This is the requirement. You should have a file, like let's say if you are copying, for an example, standard input, if it is file 1, and let's say the standard output is known as file 2, how to do it? Right? You need to find answers for this. Now, file 1.txt already it's there, right? We created it. In the second step, we created it, right? Okay, you can create file 1.txt using the second step. But once you create it, what I want to do it is you have to take contents from file 1.txt and save it directly inside a file. So there we can't type anything, right? When you do this step, we are not going to type anything from the keyboard, and also we can't see that via the terminal, right? Okay, it's just one single step, one single line using cat command, right? You have to find answers. I think I have answered for all of your questions, and there was one more question to asking how to create directories with spaces. So then you have to enclose your directory name within double quotes. If you want to create directories with spaces, you can use mkdir command, right? Mkdir, let's say if you have a directory called hello world, so then you can't create something like this, right? If you create a directory with hello world like this, it's not going to be one directory, it will be two directories. So you have to enclose them within double quotes. So then it will take as one name. Okay, find answers for the last scenario and provide the answers with the worksheet that you are submitting, right? Okay, right. Now we discuss about cat command. I'm going to work with cat command for few the activities because we have to be familiarized with head and tail commands and less and more commands. So I'm going to use cat command to create files in this one, right? In order to learn head and tail, right? Okay. So what are the names for these operators? Now you have learned greater than sign and less than sign, but you can't use these names like greater than sign and less than sign. These greater than signs and less than signs are known as redirection operators, right? So then we have special names for them, right? Redirection operators. Less than sign is known as input redirection operator, right? Input redirection operator. Greater than sign is known as output redirection operator. I'll come to this append operator later. Now this one is input redirection operator. This is called input redirection operator. So don't call them like less than sign or greater than sign, right? You have names, right? Input redirection operator. This is known as output redirection operator. So how do we get these names? You don't need to remember these names by heart, because practically if you check these things, you can identify why we have given these names like output redirection or input redirection. Now, when you check the second scenario, what is the output? That's the file. So if you change the standard output, if you are redirecting your output into a different location, then we call it as output redirection. Now in here, using greater than sign or using this output redirection operator, I can change my standard output, right? So this will change standard output. When it comes to input redirection, you can see what's going to be changed in here, file, right? I'm reading from file. So I'm not going to read contents from keyboard, which is the default standard input. I'm going to read from a file. So here, reading from a file. So then I'm changing standard input. So therefore, we can call that operator as input redirection operator. Right? So these are the main redirection operators. You have to remember their names. So there was one more command, one more operator, which was given as append operator, right? So I write it in here. That was the next operator that we are supposed to learn. It's this. Two greater than signs together, right? Don't keep spaces in between these greater than signs, right? No spaces. That's called append operator. So what do you mean by append? Appending, adding contents to the end of the file, right? Append means you're adding contents to the end of file. So what will happen if you just type content to the end of file? I'll show you that, right? In here, I'm going to exit from this one. Now, this is what I have in my file one, right? File1.txt. I have right now, hello, how are you? Right into a file, right? So these are the 3 lines I have recently typed. And this is how I have weaved that file using cat input redirection operator and file1.txt, right? I have changed from where I'm going to read it, right? Standard input. Let's say I want to type more content to this same file, right? I'm going to exit from this one. I want to write more content. So how do I write more content? I can use cat command, write more content to file 1, right? Output redirection operator, file1.txt, and press enter. Now my cursor is blinking, so I'm going to type more content, right? More lines. Okay, so these are the 3 lines and exited. Okay, so now what should I have? I should have hello, how are you, right? And also you should have this write into a file, right? These 3 lines. And also I'm recently typed as more lines. Hello, how are you? This is week 2. Okay. So this is my file, right? If I open it using the editor, this is what I can see. I can see only the new lines which I have recently typed. I can't see this hello, how are you write into a file. Those 3 lines are missing. What happened? When you use these redirection operators, especially this output redirection operator with a file, remember, it will replace the existing content with new content. It's not going to keep the previous content. It will override the content with new lines via time, right? So here, this is actually replacing the previous content. This action will replace the previous content. So that's why we can't see the previous content. It's actually overriding the file content. So if you want to add new contents to end of file, then we have to go for that append operator. Let's say I want to modify the same file1.txt and add more lines in here. So I'm going to exit from this one. Then I have to use append operator, 2 greater than signs and file1.txt. 2 more lines. With append operator. Okay, so I have added two more lines and with append operator. So here operator is changing, right? I'm not using output redirection operator. Now I'm using append operator. So see what happens. Now you can see the new lines with the existing lines. So append operator means you can add any content to the end of file, right? You can add any content to the existing file, but to the end of file, right? Okay, so here we have append operator, how to use append operator to modify a file with 2 greater than signs. Remember, no spaces in between, right? So then we have to know about a few more commands before coming to this directory hierarchy. So I'm going to show how to work with head and tail commands. So first of all, I'm going to create a file called numbers. Now we used always text txt, right? But even though we are not using txt extension, if you create any files using either cat or via editor, just by giving the name, it would be a text file, right? So when you're creating especially C programs or C++ programs, it is compulsory to use the extension. But for a text file, it's not compulsory to use the extension. And if you have used the extension, you have to reuse it, right? Like if you have created the file as file1.txt, so then you have to open it again using file1.txt, otherwise it's not going to open, right? So now I'm not going to use the extension, but remember this file is also going to be a text file, right? So I'm going to create a file with cat command. So I'm reading inputs. I'm going to use output redirection operator. So that means I'm going to read inputs from keyboard and send it to a file called numbers, right? So I'm just typing some numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Right? So up to 16. Now I have 16 lines in this file. Okay. So how do I exit? Using Control D, I can exit. Right. Now I'm going to use new command, that is head. Right? Head space numbers and press enter. What we can see. Now inside the numbers file, we know that there are 16 numbers, right? I recently entered 16 numbers, okay? If you have a doubt, we can open it in here. VI editor, using the VI editor, I'm going to open the file. So there you can see we have 16 numbers, but I can see only 10 out of it using head, right? I just gave head and numbers. So what is the reason? Using head command, we can view only the top 10 command, 10 outputs, right? We can see only the top 10 lines. If you type head and the file name, we can see the top 10 lines in this file. It will display only the top 10 lines. Let's say I'm going to use tail and numbers. What should I see? What do you think? We can see last 10 numbers, right? Last 10 numbers from 16, like from 7 to 16. So there are 10 numbers in here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 numbers. So when you have tail command with the file name, you can see last 10 numbers or last 10 lines, right? So head command will show you first 10 lines or top 10 lines, and tail command will show you last 10 lines. But in the file, remember, there are 16 lines, right? But let's say if you want to see only first five lines, if you want to see only the first 5 lines, you can do it with head command, right? You type head -5 numbers and press enter. Then we can control the number of lines that we want to see. Then we can leave first 5 lines. First 5 lines. Right? Similarly, if you want to see last 3 lines, we can use tail -3 numbers. So we can see last 3 lines now. 14, 15, 16, last 3 lines. Here we have first 5 lines. Here we have last 3 lines. It's because we are given a number, right? Number of lines that we want to read. So there are 2 examples in the lab sheet as well, right? How to use, how to control the number of lines that we want to see. Using this same method, we can control the number of lines that we want to see, right? Let's say I want to see 13 lines, right? We can provide tail -13 and numbers. So then we can leave 13 lines in here, right? Even if you want to weave last 13 lines, you can use tail -13 and the file name. So by default, tail and head will show you only 10 lines. either first or last 10 lines, right? Head and tail commands we work with first and last 10 lines. But if you want to see more than that, you can provide how many lines you want to read. So if you count down the number of lines, here we have 13 lines, right? 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 lines. So I'm going to use the same file for more and less commands. So in order to show the use of more command, I have reduced the size of the terminal. So I'll tell you the reason. If I type more and numbers in here and press enter, what we can see, I can see line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and it says more. So if you compare the numbers file, actually we have 16 lines, but I can't see all 16 when I type more and numbers. I can see only 1 to 13, right? And we can see more. Within brackets, it says 76%. So what is this 76%? I have already viewed 76% from the total content, right? From the whole file, we have read around 76% right now. We can see 76% in this terminal. So there's a reason to reduce the terminal size, because if I increase it, I can see all 16 lines. But in a file where you have 100 lines, you cannot like observe this type of more and percentage, right? So it always matters how much is the size of the terminal, the resolution size. So that's why I have reduced it and show you how many lines we can see and what kind of percentage it's going to be. So 76 means how many lines I have already viewed. If I want to read all of these lines, I can press enter and read it, right? When I press enter, it will show the next line, right? But now I can't see line number 1, but I have already read it. So therefore, it's going to show you line number 14, but line number 1 will be disappear. But it says that 84% of the file you have already viewed. But there's more to read, right? So if you type again enter, now you can see when you read 15 lines, it says there's more to read, but you have already viewed 92% from the total file content. So when you type again enter, then you can come to the end of file and see the next prompt, right? So when you type just more space and numbers, more command will show you the content of the file according to the terminal size. It depends, right? If you have several lines, if you can read only few lines through the terminal, it will show you there's more to read and how much you have read in a percentage, right? So when you press enter, you can read the rest of the file. And when you type less space numbers. Now at the end of more, you saw that the next prompt, right? The next prompt was there. But when you type less space numbers, what we can see? Still we can see only first 13 lines, but at the end of 13th line, I can see the file name, right? I can see the file name. And there's nothing called more or how much of percentage I have viewed, just file name, only the first 13 lines and just file name. So if I press enter, it's going to change, right? Now I can see line number 2 to 14 and a colon. And cursor is blinking. And if I press enter again, I can see line number 3 to 15 and again colon. So when I press enter again, it will show all 16 lines and it will display a message saying this is end. That's the end of file, right? So if I press enter further, I can't exit, right? Now, when I was using more command, you saw that I was able to exit, right? I'll show you it again. When I use more, when I press enter, I can go to the next line. And when I press enter for the last time, it will show the next prompt. But in less command, it's not going to do like that. We can't exit with enter. It's not going to show the next prompt, right? It's because using less command, it will redirect your output to a separate screen, right? So therefore, you are in a different screen. Now you can't do a lot of activities like you did in more, right? Because when you are executing more, actually you are within the same terminal, right? In the same terminal, you are going to view the content. But in less command, we are in a different screen and it's not a terminal. So we can't execute many of these commands. So if you type enter, you can't exit from here. So how do I exit? If you press Q, you can exit, right? You can press Q from the keyboard and exit. So when you press Q, can you see the prompt, right? Now with more command, if you compare with more command, when you type more numbers, you are weaving the content to the same terminal. And once you weave all the content, only you can see the next prompt. But with less command, we can type less numbers, right? But when you exit from this screen, you will come back to the point where you were and you can't see anything in the terminal because your output was directing to a separate screen. Okay, so in the lab sheet, there's a small table given in here. Right? So as the homework, you have to fill this table. Right? Try to use these arrow keys with less utility, right? When you are using less utility, try to see whether less command, like less test.txt or less numbers. Try to use these arrow keys and page up, page down keys, letter B, U, and Q. So see what it going to return. And if it is working, you can put a tick in this table, right? So I think you saw that Q is going to work, right? When you type Q, it's going to work. It's going to quit from the terminal, quit from the screen. So then it will come back to the terminal. So Q is going to work. So check whether it is working for the other keys. For more utility, also you can try out these things again. There's a question. Now, one more thing, when I'm working in the virtual machine, I can't see your messages, right? Because when I'm inside the virtual machine, I can't see Zoom or anything, right? So I think I have certain questions. Numbers file, and you input the values. Numbers file, actually I created it, right? I created numbers file. Okay. Here I have created it. Okay. You can use V editor or using cat command because you have learned cat command. You can use it to create this numbers file, right? Either using V editor or cat command. I said that for head command, it's actually -3, right? Like if you want to weave only the first 3 lines, it should be -3, right? Even in the lab sheet, it says you have -3 to like show the first three lines or either whatever the number lines, not plus. Can you explain less command again? No, for the last question, do we need to include this single quotes? No, you don't need to, right? This is just to denote that it's the character. Just to denote that this is a character, you just need to try out whether letter B is working, letter U is working, Q is working, right? No need to insert this single quotes. Right, so we have to come back the lesson quickly. For the more command, the less command, what I did is I just type less numbers and press enter. And I can see only the number of lines. That depends, right? This number of lines can depend because if you have a very large terminal, of course you can see all 16 lines, right? It depends upon the number of lines you have. But since I have reduced the terminal size, I can see only the first 13 lines. And at the end, I can see the number's name. Now is the file name. So when I press enter, I can read the next few lines. So when I read all 16 lines, it will show that end, right? So end means that is the end of file. And the cursor is blinking. So though I press enter key, I can't go back. So if I want to go back, I have to press Q and exit. So less command, when you are using less command, remember it will open the file in a different screen, right? When we are using more command, we are inside the same terminal, right? As you can see, when you type more command, we are inside the same terminal. We can see the content by the same terminal, but less is not same, right? Less will show you the content in different terminal. Okay, hope you have got it, right? So I want you to do this exercise 1 as homework. So there are a few commands like echo, hello world, date, host name, arc, right? ARCH, you name. Likewise, there are set of commands, actually around 26 commands. So try to do them and you have to take screenshots about the output, right? So I gave you some homework to do. First one was from this cat command, right? So I wanted to know what is the command that you have to use in order to read from a file and write it to the file. That was the first question. And the second question was this, right? Fill in the table. Okay, you have to check these keys and see for which keys it's going to react, right? You have to just put the tick or either cross sign if it is working or not. And exercise 1, it's up to you. You have to completely do it on your own, right? So you have to provide me what are the screenshots, like you can execute several commands in one terminal and get the output and show the screenshot, as well as you have to read the manual page and find out what are the commands, right? So for an example, if you take echo, what is the meaning of echo? Using date command, if you type date, what we can see, right? Don't just give me the output, right? I know that you can execute all of these commands very easily and get the output, but you have to find out what is the meaning of date and what is the meaning of host name, what we can see, right? That also should be there in your answer sheets. Okay. So that's exercise 1, but I'll show you how to do exercise 2. In exercise 2, we are going to explore the directory hierarchy, right? So we are going to explore the directory hierarchy of especially the dev directory. And it is asking you a question. Can you identify what devices are available, which are character oriented and which are block oriented? Can you identify your TTY, terminal device? Type in who am I might help. who is the owner of your TTY using ls minus l, right? So we are going to observe the directories which are inside root directory. Okay, so this is just a sample of what are the directories within the root directory. So inside the root directory, we know that we can represent root directory with forward slash. Inside the root directory, you should be able to find bin directory, boot directory, dev directory, right? Likewise, these are the list of directories available within the root directory, right? So if I want to see these directories, how do I view? Now my current location, I'm inside root user account. So first of all, I should go back to root directory. If I type cd and forward slash and press enter, I can go back to root directory. Now current location is root directory. If I type ls, I should be able to see the files within this root directory. Okay, so these are the files and the directories available within the root directory. Now, if you can note it down, that some of these directories, if I say what some of these directories like bin, boot, dev, etc. Can you see the hierarchy? Even in the hierarchy which I have listed in here, bin, boot, dev, etc, home, these directories are there, right? So remember this is the common structure for any Linux distribution, right? So these are the directories available inside this root directory. Now, when you observe it carefully, can you see I have a directory for home separately? And can you see my root user? This is the root user. Root users directory. It comes separately. Right? Now, when I'm initially logging to this account, it will log in as root user. So then I'm inside root directory, root user. So this is the directory which I'm working right now. Okay. So if I want to view the contents of each and every directory, how should I read it? I can use ls minus l to view the content of the directories. Okay. So if I type ls minus l and bin, press enter, I can view the content of the bin directory. Right? So bin is one of these directories inside the root. So remember, I didn't change the location. I just type ls minus l and type bin. So then I can view the content of bin directory. What we can find inside bin directory? Inside bin directory, we can find all the binary files or executables. Now, when you check these files, most of these file names are in green color. Right? File names are in green color, light green color. And some of these files are in light blue color, right? But most of them are in green color. And if you read these file names, can you see most of these file names are actually command names, and we have used them, right? Now, for an example, recently we use cat command, right? So can you see cat is there already? And its file name is in green color, right? And we use cp. cp was a command to copy files and directories. So cp is also there. Now, when you execute the commands which is in exercise 2, you can find more commands from this list. But if I take very common commands, Like recently we did less command, right? Less is also there, right? And ls command is there. What else? mkdir. So what is it actually? Inside bin directory, you can find all the executables of Unix utilities. So either it is ls, mkdir, pwd, mo, less, cp, move, all of these things are Unix commands. So we can see the executable files of these Unix commands, right? So remember, if you take one of these commands, like for an example, pwd command is actually written using C language, right? So when we are doing these operating systems lessons, so why we are learning C language, it's because most of these Unix environment, most of these codings have written in C language. So even in this Unix utilities, they have used C language. So if you take pwd command, there are nearly 800 lines in pwd program, right? To execute pwd command, they are using a C language code, source code. So in that source code, there are 800 lines. If you take ls command, it's more than 1000 lines of codes, right? Because including all the options like -l, -a, like this, there are so many options. Including all the options, there are more than 1000 lines. I think it's around 1003 or 1004 number of lines in the ls command program, C program, right? So remember, Unix operating systems are using C language. Their source code is available in C language. And also, these type of Unix utilities have written in C language. So when you're making a file in C language, we know that we can make like we have to compile it and create an executable, right? So let's say, for an example, if you are creating a file called hello.c, if you have a file called hello.c, using GCC compiler, we are compiling this file, right? So we are using this compiler and create a executable, okay? So let's say we are compiling it like GCC -o hi and hello.c. So my executable file name is hi, right? Hi is my executable file name. So this executable file names are in green color. In systems, this is in green color and it's an executable or binary file. But when you take this hello.c, it's a regular file, right? This is a source code. Okay. So how do we identify regular files in a system? When you type ls-l option, in the system, we can see what is the file type, right? File type is given as hyphen. So when the file type is hyphen, it's just a source code or an executable, right? So when you are creating a directory, it's letter D, right? For a directory. But when it is hyphen, hyphen means it's a regular file. So what are these regular files? It can be .c file or it can be .cpp. And when you are writing Python files, it can be .py. And if you're opening a text file, it's a text.txt. And also, this includes these executables. Even for executables, file type denotes with hyphen. But remember, their colors are different, right? So .c, .cpp, any source code files or text files comes in either white or black. that depends on the background color. But this one comes in green color. That's how we can differentiate. Okay. So inside this bin directory, we can see all the binary files. Now, what are these light blue color files? Now, light blue color files, it shows a direction, right? Now, BZCMP. BZCMP is the file name, and it's directing this or pointing out into a different file called BZDILL. And can you see there's a separate file with that name as well. So this is actually a link, soft link. It's a shortcut, right? So when the file type is simple L, it's a soft link. So if you have file type with simple L, it's a soft link. Okay. Soft links are in light blue color. Okay. So we have several other directories, but I want you to observe dev directory. That's the question, right? If you examine dev directory, this is what we can see. Right? This is the output of dev directory. Now, inside the dev directory, you can see it has different colors for the file names. But if you read it carefully, can you see some of these file names are actually discussing about the devices types. Now, for an example, we have bus, okay, CD-ROM, CD-RW, CD writer, right? CPU, disk, DVD, DVD writers, FD, FD0, right? And also log files and some null file, right? Null is a special file where we can direct some of the standard errors. And also SDA, SD1, SDA2, SDA5, right? So these are hard disk files. And TTY, TTY means terminal, right? TTY, and we have several other terminals, right? Different types of terminals. So TTY. Likewise, it display what are the device files available inside this system, right? So in DEV directory, you can find all the device files. So there are two types of, mainly there are two types of file types. You can see some of these files in C, letter C, right? File type comes with letter C. And some of these files are starting with letter B, right? Now, for an example, if you take FD0, FD0, can you see it as B, right? Letter B. So if the file type is C, C means character oriented. Character oriented. If the file type is B, that means it's block oriented. Block oriented. Okay. Character oriented and block oriented. And one more thing here, for log file, which comes in green colors, purple color, can you see file type is S. S means socket files. Socket files. Right? S means socket files. So all the device files are resides within the dev directory. Right? That's the summary. Okay, so you can observe what are the devices. Now, for an example, FD0 means that's the floppy drive, right? And for an example, SDA means it's a hard disk. TTY means that's the terminal, right? So even if you find out what is the name for keyboard, you can find where the keyboard is, right? So likewise, you can find all the devices. Right? So all the device files are available within the dev directory. Right? Device files resides within the dev directory. Similarly, you can observe the other directory contents. So I have provided you what are the contents in here. For boot directory, we can find all the static files of the bootloader. So that has the bootstrap program. So when you restart a machine or switch on a PC, there's a bootstrap program which is running. So that resides within the boot directory. So likewise, etc directory, it has some configuration files, system configuration files inside etc directory. Home directory, we have all the user accounts, right? Users home directories. So even if you have student directory, ITSP directories, or your own account directory, user account directory comes under users home directory. So likewise, we can find all of the other directories in here and their contents. But inside dev directory, this is what we can see. All the device special files can be viewed inside the dev directory. So as I told you, letter C means it's character special or character oriented files. Character special or character oriented files. So if the file type in here, you can see it's C, right? If the file type is C, it means it's character oriented or character special files. So what is the meaning of character special? In character special files, it will read or write content character by character, right? For an example, if you take keyboard, it will read character by character. To the terminal, we are going to output character by character. To a printer, we are writing character by character. Right? We are writing character by character. Okay. Character oriented or character special files means it will write or read contents character by character. If you have letter B, that means it's block oriented or special files. Block special file or block oriented. So for an example, hard disk, right? Hard disk is a block special file, and CD-ROM, it's a block special file. RAM, it's a block special file. So especially memory devices like secondary storage and primary storage devices comes under block oriented or block special files. It's because it will write or read contents as a block. It's not just one character at a time. It will read set of characters or block of characters together or write block of characters together, right? So when you're writing to the hard disk, actually it will not write character by character. It will take set of letters together and write it as a block, one block. So that's why we call it as block oriented or block special files. So those are the main types available in the device directory. Other than that, if you find letter S means socket files. So socket files will be used to keep the network connection. So in my case, I think you saw that there was only one file called log file with file type as socket file. So you have learned few more types of file types like D for directory, hyphen for regular files and executables, and simple L for soft links or shortcuts, and simple C for character oriented, simple B for block oriented, and S for socket files. So those are the basic file types available in our system. Okay, so then we have C program. So I'm not going to discuss the C program now. So what you have to do is you have to observe the other directory contents as well. Since I have given in the meanings in this slide, you can see what are the usages of each and every directory. Okay, so you have to do this question, exercise 1, as well as the other 2 questions which I have given you. And also you have to prepare a document with whatever the outputs, and also you can include the meanings of each and every commands that you are learning from this exercise 1. Don't write it like, don't do it like just taking the outputs and providing the screenshot of the output. Just see what is the meaning of hostname and why do we use it. What's the meaning of arc? Why do we use it? What kind of output we can see, right? So likewise, you have to prepare a document for this exercise 1 and upload your PDF document to the submission link. Okay. So also observe the other subdirectories. It's actually a homework. I don't need to see the outputs. See what are the other contents, what are the files available in different directories. Okay. Right. So that's all for today's lesson. We are going to discuss these exercise 3 and 4 in a different lab session. Any questions, you can forward it to my email address related to lab sessions, right? Regarding your lecture or exam issues, you have to solve it with the lecturer in charge. But basically, if you have questions from lab sessions, you can forward it my email. Okay, so that's all for today's lesson. Thank you for participating in today's lab session. So I will upload this recording to the Moodle. You have to do exercise 1 and you can do exercise 2, but I don't need any copies, any answers for exercise 2. But you have to provide answers for exercise 1, right? I mean, you have to execute this exercise 1 commands and write down what is the meaning of echo command and what was the output, right? Likewise, you have to do it. Okay, right. That's all for today. Thank you for coming.